absolutely fucking sick. That's the first track off of Kalamata Disruption. I think that album came out last year, 2017. In any case, it's one of my favorites. The fucking shit just rocks, man. Just fucking rocks. All right, I'm gonna have to switch to screen view, screen capture, and shit's gonna look a little goofy for a minute, but no big deal. Let me get rid of that text. Oh dear God, what have I done? Stay with me, folks. I'm a trained professional, but I forgot everything I ever learned. Okay, this can be as complicated and fucked up as we let it be, because now we're really getting into some technical jargon and stuff that is really way above my intellectual pay grade. And as we're going through this, probably going to stop a couple times to take a peek at Wikipedia and try to figure out what the fuck we're talking about. You know, I'm certain words seem simple enough, but like cytotoxic, let's take a second and find out exactly what the fuck cytotoxic means. Just for shiggles. It's the quality of being toxic to cells. Well, imagine that. Examples of toxic agents are an immune cell or some types of venom. So immune cells are cytotoxic because they attack the cells that they recognize as intruders and kill them. And you know, venom is kind of interesting too, because depending on the different types of venom, different types of cells will be affected. So cytotoxicity is really like a blanket term, but can refer to things that are specifically toxic only in certain situations or only to certain other cells. And that's going to be worth noting because there'll be references to that later on in this report. Specifically that some of these Harmala alkaloids are cytotoxic, and they'll say they're cytotoxic in the report, but they won't specify that they're talking about malignant cancer cells when they refer to that cytotoxicity. There is kind of an offhand reference to selectivity, and that these alkaloids tend to attack only active cancer cells, which is really kind of one of the fucking curiosities about them, is that they're able to recognize, say, a benign tumor from a malignant tumor. And from what I understand, the Harmala alkaloids generally don't affect benign cells or benign tumors. They really have kind of like a bulldog sort of hard-on for the growing malignancies, which is, again, one of the medical mysteries of Harmala. So anyway, I didn't go through and highlight sections that I thought were half-ass readable in this section, because just the whole thing is difficult. Okay, so there's a bit of a boredom warning right now, because it's really not going to get any more interesting than it already has been, unless you're really interested in this kind of shit like I am. So that said, let's get on with this. In past decades, several studies have showed or shown, depending on where you're from, that extracts and compounds isolated from the genus Peganum inhibit the growth of various cancer cells. The ethanol total alkaloids extract of P. harmala from different parts were cytotoxic towards practically all malignant cancer cells. I want to clarify again, when they're talking about the ethanol total alkaloids extracts, they're generally speaking of using these different parts of the plant, the aerial parts, the fruits, the seeds, and the roots, grinding them all up willy-nilly and soaking them in booze or isopropyl alcohol or methanol. They all three work fairly well. Ethanol, isopropyl, and methanol are all going to do basically the same thing in these extractions, but of course you don't want to use methanol if you intend to ingest this stuff. If you're looking at an alkaloid extract, a simple extract from, say, P. harmala seeds, which is what I do all the time, a really safe bet is just use like Everclear or high-proof vodka. Any clear, unflavored grain alcohol will take care of that for you. Even if there's some water in it, it's not really a big deal. The alkaloids are absorbed in the water as well, and you know, if you have a little bit of water in your alcohol, it's not going to be a big deal. Actually, alcohol really kind of needs water to exist as alcohol. It's called an azeotrope, but that's a different story. So yeah, anyway, to make a complicated thing simple, just use booze. Soak your seeds in booze and you'll get a fine extract, trust me. And if you feel like it, you can evaporate that away in a dish, and then you'll have like solids. The alkaloids will actually be in solid form left behind. You can scrape that up and save it or whatever, but I really recommend you don't do that, because then you get into concentrations, and sometimes it's easier just to deal with a tincture. So anyway, Pan et al. In 1985 first reported the anti-tumor activities of genus Peganum, and harmine showed a significant inhibitory effect on sarcoma 180 in mice. In another study, 9 harmine derivatives isolated from P. harmala showed inhibitory effect against Lewis lung cancer sarcoma 180 or Hep A tumor in mice at rates of 15.3 to 49.5%. That's fucking huge. It's worth commenting here. They say in another study, 9 harmine derivatives. Now they're specifying harmine, which is a specific alkaloid in harmala, and they're talking about derivatives isolated. That tells me that they were looking to take the naturally occurring compounds, modify them, hope that they still exhibited the same effects as the natural compounds, and then they could take that modified molecule and patent it. So everything that we're reading is driven by a desire to make money. Okay, the whole thing here is to tweak a naturally occurring molecule and then claim it as your own and get rich off it. Not that I have any issues with that, because hey, I'm a fucking capitalist too. But it's something that's important to keep in mind. So, harmine and its derivatives resulted in vitro cytotoxicity, which is IC50 values. IC50, again, that's the inhibition concentration, and 50 means 50%. So IC50 represents half of the dose that is required for full inhibition, or to put it another way, it's half the dose it takes to stop something bad from fucking happening, or something good from happening for that matter. But it's the rate at which it's effective in a given situation. So Harmine and its derivatives resulted in vitro cytotoxicity values of 0.1 to 0.02 micromoles in Hep G2 cells. And that's really, we're getting way out of my intellectual pay grade. And I'm going to try to stick to the subject. Substitution C3 and arylate C9 of the tricyclic skeleton. Okay, now they're just talking about the shit that they did to the harmine molecule to create the compounds that they used, and they're talking about what they did made them ideal agents to be used as novel anti-tumor drugs with lesser side effects. Lesser side effects than what? They don't say. I'm guessing lesser side effects than the industry standard, but I don't know. Furthermore, p-harmala showed a higher selectivity towards malignant cells than common anti-cancer drugs like doxorubicin. Take that. Harmine and harmaline were effective on the human promyelocytic cell line, HL60 cells. The result demonstrated that harmine and harmaline showed cytostatic effect and cessation of cell growth. However, both agents at higher concentration displayed cytotoxic effect. Now, I'm reading that to mean that that at one dose they slow cancerous growth down, and at higher doses they actually stop the growth of the tumor and display a cytotoxic effect. As we know, that means it kills cells, so it's effectively killing the cancer, which is groovy. It was found that harmaline was the most potent compound against this shit here in a series of tumor cell lines such as hepatocarcinoma, that's cancer of the blood, fibrosarcoma, not sure, myeloma, I'm pretty sure that's bone cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, melanoma or skin cancer. So harmaline just straight fucks some cancer up. In cytotoxicity assays, harmine exhibited a strong inhibitory effect on the growth and proliferation of carcinoma cells, whereas it had no significant effect on quiescent fibroblasts. Now, my layman's reading of that tells me that harmine worked really well to deal with carcinoma cells, a malignant tumor, whereas it had no significant effect on quiescent fibroblasts, or which is to say, benign tumors, which is fucking fascinating. There has to be some kind of signal, some sort of condition in the growing tumor that the harmine or the harmala alkaloid recognizes and attaches and does its thing because of that. I don't know. It's fascinating, and I'm constantly kicking myself that I didn't go to MIT, but you know, I couldn't go to MIT because I was not smart enough. So harmine also displayed dose-dependent inhibitory effect on cell proliferation against all human carcinoma cells. Well, that's a hell of a fucking claim, but they're not claiming it. They're saying that they observed and recorded harmine displaying a dose-dependent effect on all human carcinoma cells. I don't know that there's anything else that has been shown to be that broad spectrum and to have an effect on all types of cancer. And again, things like this, if you tell somebody, yeah, harmala's bitchin', it kills every kind of cancer in the human body, you're going to get looked at like you're a fucking moron. And the thing is, I want to be able to tell people that, but I want to be able to tell people that with a degree of intelligence and be able to cite my sources and back my bullshit. And really, that's the entire reason why I'm going through these incredibly dry readings of this incredibly dry report, then unfortunately for the rest of the world, there's probably going to be a lot more of these in the future. Because this is just, it's very informative to me, and whether or not you guys get anything out of it is kind of secondary to me. Not to sound like a greedy asshole, but again, I am a chronic solipsist, and that's probably another reason why I never got into MIT. Recently, some researchers have also studied the mechanisms underlying the cytotoxicity and anti-tumor effects of the extracts and compound, which mainly include intercalating into DNP and interfering its synthesis with inhibiting topoisomerase 1 and 2 cyclin-dependent kinases, which are CDKs, cyclin-dependent kinases, and inducing apoptosis mechanism. Now, apoptosis is a word I know. Apoptosis refers to cell death, and particularly apoptosis is the mechanism with which the cell tells itself or gives itself instructions to die, so that it can then be taken apart piecemeal and recycled by the body. And apoptosis is critical to the survival of an organism. And I know it sounds like cellular suicide, and it actually is cellular suicide, but it comes at the point where the cell can no longer offer more to the organism than its recycled constituents would. And that's an important resource for those recycled constituents. So when apoptosis isn't happening properly, you got a bunch of dead weight, a bunch of cells that aren't doing anything for you, and you're kind of robbing your body of the resources that those cells are hogging. So sometimes dying is beneficial. Imagine that. Spectroscopic evidence showed the affinity of alkaloids DNA/DNA binding was in the order of harmine is greatest, then harmalol, then harmaline, then harmane. And no biopolymer secondary structural changes were observed upon alkaloid interaction, and DNA remains in the B family structure in these complexes. That means fucking nothing to me. Absolutely over my head. The mechanistic studies indicated that beta-carboline analogs inhibited DNA topoisomerases and interfered with DNA synthesis, and then exerted anti-tumor activities. Now, I'm fairly certain, I'm like 99% positive that when they talk about these beta-carbolines interfering and affecting DNA synthesis, they're not talking about DNA synthesis in healthy cellular structures. They're specifically talking about malignant tumors, and that's pretty important to note. They interacted with DNA via groove binding and intercalative modes and caused major DNA structural changes. See, and I think that this is the key sentence for understanding how the Harmala alkaloids recognize the types of DNA that they need to bind with. I'm assuming that this groove binding and intercalative modes refer to kind of an abnormal malignant situation that the Harmala alkaloid can recognize and then say, oh, well, that's what I want, and then go attach itself to it. Again, that's kind of speculation because, hey, man, I really don't know, and you're learning along with me. And this is absolutely something that I need to look into further, and that's the interaction of Harmala alkaloids with DNA and try to get my head around it. But for right now, we're just going to stick to the anti-tumor, anti-cancer properties and try to just knock this out. In vitro findings verified And real quickly, I want to talk about the difference between in vitro and in vivo. Um, in vitro comes from the Latin root. Vitro is like the Latin root for glass or vitreous. Um, so when you see in vitro, I think of two two microscope slides sandwiched together with something in between them, and that something in between them is in vitro. It's within glass. So you see in vitro a lot. You'll also see in vivo, and in vivo refers to within an organism. Um, so in vivo findings are generally findings that come uh, from either mammalian or human research, and in vitro findings are generally shit in a test tube or on a slide or generally in the lab. So on slides, findings verified that P. harmala seeds extracts inhibited human DNA topoisomerase 1, and based on the result of high-performance thin-layer chromatography analysis, it appears that the biological extract activity of the extract could be explained by its beta-carboline content. That's sort of redundant. We've been talking about that. And again, here's the order of potency. Harmine is stronger than harmane, which is stronger than harmaline. Um, the most active compound was harmine, obviously. And this is kind of going over what we've already gone over. There's a lot of repetition in this study. Interestingly, a study suggested that the anti-tumor potencies of beta-carboline derivatives were enhanced by the introduction of benzyl, more tweaking with the molecule with the aim of having a patentable substance. Might be an important basis for the synthesis. Yeah, they're really repeating themselves. Like they really want to sell us on this modified harmala alkaloid that they're producing. One study demonstrated that the inhibitory effect on the activity of DNA topoisomerase 2 was one of the mechanisms of harmaline, harmine, harmane, and total alkaloids of P. harmala against the tumor and cytotoxic effect. However, another study indicated that harmine and its derivatives exhibited remarkable DNA intercalation capacity and significant topoisomerase 1 inhibition activity, but no effect on topoisomerase 2. So two studies, two different findings. That's not surprising at all. That's why you can't rely on any one single study for any type of information. So the upshot is, aside from the fact that they really, really want us to be interested in the modified harmala alkaloids that they've made, we can take away from that the substances themselves, the shit that's actually in a simple extract from Peganum harmala is phenomenally effective against cancer. And from what I'm reading, it may have less bad side effects than anything on the market right now, and it certainly is more effective against a broader spectrum than anything on the market right now. And it just kind of has to make you wonder. I mean, it's good that this research is happening, and even if that means they have to make synthetic analogs so that they can patent this shit and turn it into a pharmaceutical drug, you know, in a way, I'm all right with that too, because if that's what it takes to get this out to the public, and of course, there's a large population that isn't going to trust anything unless a doctor hands it to them, and you know, we have to be real about that too. But I mean, that's kind of my takeaway from this so far, is just that gee, this shit really does work against cancer. I wish that I was able to really to give a more cogent read of this, but fuck, I'm doing my best. P-harmala extract decreased the growth rate of the breast cancer cell line through inducing apoptosis mechanism. So breast cancer, you take Peganum harmala, and it tells that breast cancer to fucking die. And apparently the breast cancer pays attention. They're talking about Bax and Puma genes. They're going to talk about the BID gene. I don't know nearly enough about genetics to get into that. Results strongly showed that harmaline could inhibit tumor cell proliferation and induce G2/M cell cycle arrest, accompanied by an increase in apoptotic cell death in SGC-7901 cancer cells. No idea what that is. Harmaline could upregulate the expression of cell-related proteins, blah, 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 and downregulate the expression of another one. And you really have to have a fucking master's degree to get anything out of that, I think. In addition, harmaline could upregulate the expressions of blah blah and blah blah L, activated capsase 8 and caspase 3. However, blocking blah blah and blah blah L signaling could markedly inhibit the apoptosis caused by harmaline, suggesting that the blah 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 L mediated pathways are more involved in harmaline-induced apoptosis, which actually sounds pretty interesting, and I wish I could understand this. What I'm taking that to mean is that by blocking this FAS-L signaling, the effectiveness of harmaline on cancerous cell death is less. So there seems to be a connection, some sort of relationship there, which again is worthy of an entire fucking study on its own. Interestingly, harmaline could also exert an anti-tumor activity with a dose of 15 milligrams per kilogram in vivo, so probably in rats, which is also related to cell cycle arrest. Interestingly, probably about almost 4 hours ago now, I took 500 milligrams of harmala hydrochloride that I had extracted. It's the cleanest extract I've done yet, and I went ahead and factored in my my body weight in kilos and did some math, and my dose at 500 milligrams for a 185 pound guy works out to about 16.5 milligrams per kilogram. So right now I'm on a little bit more than this anti-tumor activity dose, which was recorded in vivo, which again probably means when in rats, and that also which was also related to cell cycle arrest. In other words, stopping the cell cycle, ceasing growth. I'm assuming that to mean, cell division and things like that, which is different than apoptosis, but like halfway there. I mean, when you stop growing, you're just steps away from dying, right? These new findings provided a framework for further exploration of harmaline, which possessed the potential anti-tumor activity by inducing cell cycle arrest and apoptosis. I could have skipped like the whole first part of this particular section of this report and just come straight to this sentence and gotten just about as much out of it as I did. God, how much for... Okay, we're almost there. Almost done with this section. More recently, pegaharmine D showed the strong G quadruplex interaction exhibited significant cytotoxic activity against 3 cancer cell lines. Wang et al. 2016b. Pegaharmine D. This is the first I've seen pegaharmine D referred to. I don't know if that's a naturally occurring alkaloid, or if that is one of their hybrids, one of their synthetic creations. I just don't know. A novel triterpenoid, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, was isolated from the seeds of Peganum harmala, showed high cytotoxicity against human lung cancer cells, A549, with an IC value of 8.03 plus or minus 0.81 micromoles, which is interesting. And a micromole, I'm assuming that's a micromole. I'm almost positive that right there means micromole. A mole is like a measurement that is used in stoichiometry, which probably doesn't help you all if you have no knowledge of chemistry. But you can look up a mole or molar weight, or molar weight stoichiometry, stoichiometry, and kind of wrap your head around what a mole is. But that's just some homework for you. It had a potent anti-NSCLC cell activity. I have no idea what that is. They probably referred to it already in the study somewhere. By interfering with the epidermal growth factor receptor activation and its downstream signaling, it could exert an anti-proliferative effect by inactivation of EGFR-driven anti-apoptotic pathway, followed by the release of mitochondrial cytochrome C, which might prove to be a promising leading compound for the development of an anti-cancer lung drug. Wang et al. 2016. Yeah, and I really didn't understand a whole lot of that either, other than to recognize that there's tremendous progress being made with these plant medicines. This last study being referred to here was Wang et al. 2016, and that's just fucking fascinating. Just fascinating to me. So section 5.4, opioid receptor and analgesic effect. I think I'll save that for the next video, because I'm probably going to get into that a little more than I have the previous sections, which dealt with, of course, so far we've dealt with the anti-Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease effects of harmala alkaloids. We've dealt with the antidepressive effects of harmala alkaloids, and just now we've dealt with the anti-cancer effects of harmala alkaloids. So our next video is going to be dealing with the effect on the opioid receptors and the analgesic effects of harmala. So I'm going to pop back over here and kill that screen and play this out with some more Kalamata. Everybody have a great night. kids, now's a good time to fire up a duty. Or whatever your preference may be. Throw some bourbon down your neck, fuck, I don't care. kids, that's Kalamata. The album is Disruption. I'll put the link in the doobly-doo down below, as well as credits to the artists. I'm certain that I got a copyright notice on this one, but really all that means is that the artist will be able to put commercials or put ads on my video, and they will get the money from the ads, not me. And that's fine with me, because my channel has always been demonetized. I really don't have much interest in monetizing my channel anyway. So, just going to sign out in the chat room. And end the stream. So, everybody have a bitchin' night. Later.